Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video, and today I'm excited because we're checking out the new Red Komodo footage. This awesome other YouTuber, Joey Helms, uploaded a video showing some sample footage and was kind enough to put a Google Drive link to the footage, so I will link his video down below so you can check out his video, as well as if you want to play around with the footage, you can do that as well. If you don't already know, the Red Komodo is Red's new budget-friendly camera, coming in at around $7,000 to $9,000. The pricing hasn't been locked in yet, but it is going to be a sub $10,000 camera, which besides the Raven is pretty unheard of for Red. It's a beautiful small form factor. Between the form factor, the global shutter, and overall just being Red is very interesting. The specs aren't that crazy different from other cameras like my Pocket 6K, the Z Cam, and of course you have like the C300, 200, whichever one, and a bunch of other cameras all coming in at around the same tech specs. But the global shutter is incredibly interesting, and yeah, I do want to point out that the dynamic range, I couldn't find an exact number. Jared, one of the co-owners, did post this, comparing it to the Helium, and the Komodo definitely looks really clean in the blacks, and it's coming in at a pretty comparable compared to the Helium, which is around 15 stops, so I'm guessing that's what the dynamic range is going to be. But yeah, so we have a bunch of different clips in here. A lot of it is buildings and landscapes. You can see got a nice kind of backlit, good dynamic range test there, and we are viewing everything at its native 6K resolution. Anything that you see here that's full top to bottom is the full 6K. It's a little shorter than the Pocket 6K sensor. The thing that I really like about Red is when you hop into the colors controls, I'm going to make this all one screen here. If I go over to camera controls here, you can see that this was actually shot in Rec 709, but if you wanted to do something vastly different with it, you can easily go in, change the gamma and color space, and throw it right back into log. So it definitely has that nice red code codec attached to it, so you can always make changes in post. Pretty common with any camera that especially any cinema camera that you can choose raw. The other thing that I really am jealous of compared to something like my blackmagic is since it's not dual ISO, and baby's awake. All right, it's about 6 hours later and the baby's now asleep, but we shall continue on this lovely adventure. So yeah, as I was saying, one of the awesome things compared to my Blackmagic Pocket 6K, which is dual native ISO 100 through 800 on one sensor, and then 1000 through 6400 on the next, and that does give you a lower noise profile. But one of the downsides is if you are shooting like this, for example, I'm shooting at ISO 1250, I only have between 1000 and 1250 and 6400. I can't go below that because you can't change the actual sensor that you're using. Whereas here on the Komodo, we can see that we can go all the way from the base ISO of 50 all the way up to 12,800. You know, on here it may not be the equivalent of 1250 on the Pocket 6K with resetting the noise profile and everything. It is kind of a benefit to be able to have your entire ISO range all be able to be changed in post-production. So that's really nice. Now again, when I first downloaded this was on Rec 709 essentially. I'm guessing he changed that in camera. But again, it is nice being able to change back to log if we wanted. You could do something really crazy with it. Or I really like this RE LUT. And so I usually apply this as kind of a base. So a lot of times the look of a camera honestly can be pretty hard to tell depending on the scenario that it's shot with. So something like this, if you told me this was a Canon mirrorless, Sony mirrorless, that's a joke, not Sony, you can tell Sony anywhere, or Blackmagic, or really any other camera, I would probably believe you, because in stuff like this, the only differentiators is really the lens characteristics, and obviously that's the lens, not really the camera. So this isn't that crazy of a scenario. If we go something like this low light, this is where I kind of get more of that red feeling. Go to Rec 709. We're definitely getting some major noise here. We can see that he's shooting at 4,000, and you can see here in the shadows, you have some major color noise that's not so pretty. One really neat trick, since this happens to every camera, is let's say you can't change the ISO or you don't want to, it's the proper exposure. So here's a really easy and neat trick inside of Resolve is if you go into the noise reduction section and you see this spatial threshold, you have Luma and Chroma. Originally they're linked. And so as soon as you start to slide these, you can see how muddy the picture is getting. And this is what a lot of noise reduction does, is it just becomes really, really gross. And so I'm going to pull this back all the way. And what you're going to do is unlink these two and only change the chroma. And you can see what's happening here is it's actually taking the color and some of that gross tint away. You can see that the darkest shadows actually have a blue tint to them. And when I mess with the chroma here, it goes more black. It's not getting rid of all of the color just because that's the way the image is. That's a little bit what you're stuck with. And then you can adjust the Luma ever so slightly if you want, but honestly, I never really touch this. I'll go here to the temporal noise reduction. And this one is a lot more, subtle. It's a little bit more subtle. Yeah, so without messing with any sort of the colors or anything, this is way cleaner and better looking, especially in the deep blacks and shadows. Pretty much eliminated all of the ugly chroma noise. And so now we just have a little bit of like grain. I mean, it still has some noise to it, but now it looks almost more like film grain rather than just gross digital noise. Now here we have, again, the talking head shot of Joey here, I believe. And again, this is one of those other clips where it's not bad by any means. If I apply my ARRI LUT here and start to go into the primaries, feeling a bit warmer, I'm gonna add a vignette. And since it's talking head, he's pretty much always staying in the middle. Invert that, curves, Luma. And now I take the outside node and do the opposite. Now we can also see a little bit of clipping here. I know this is pretty nitpicky. Again, most people won't care, but let's see how it brings back those highlights. This is where the highlight recovery would be nice. Now on this one, I don't have my highlight controls. So that's got to be enabled. So you can't be in log and get these highlight controls. Interesting. So the biggest lesson here with all these different shots and different cameras is you really just have to be an expert at what scenarios your camera is good at and what aren't. I mean, we've all seen plenty of short films at this point from phones that like blow your mind and look amazing. And that's because the creator and the filmmaker understood its limitations and didn't put it in scenarios where it would be obvious that they were shooting on a much lower quality camera. And so for here, like this is a great example of a limitation that a lot of cameras have that Reds don't, is Reds have great highlight roll off, in my opinion. That's why they're often used as a full-on cinema camera in Hollywood. And this is a perfect example. A lot of this has to do with the lens, so there is that, but not a lot of cameras, even some of the best mirrorless cameras nowadays, can you shoot it directly into the sun like this and get something that doesn't look like utter poo-poo. I mean, this still looks great. You have a nice flare. Mess around with the exposure a little bit. If I wanted to give this real kind of sunset vibes, a little more golden hour, it just looks good. I don't know what else to say. This nighttime stuff, super sharp, also quite a bit noisy. Even zoomed all the way out, you can definitely see the noise. The thing about cinema cameras and noise is pretty much no major cinema cameras are great in low light. I mean, a Sony a7S III is going to kick ass compared to a $60,000 ARRI Mini. Cinema cameras, even though they have giant sensors and great color reproduction, they're just not built for low light. And so the Komodo is not really any different. The Komodo is not going to be the king of low light. I mean, at 1280 ISO. That was pretty darn noisy. So if you're looking to buy this camera to be the next beast of low light scenarios, I wouldn't count on it. Resolve has amazing noise reduction, and you can do a lot to save it, just like they would in a normal Hollywood movie. And this is 800 ISO, definitely a bit underexposed. Still quite noisy. Yeah, look at the clouds up here. Oh, that's so bad. Again though, we just go in here and around 15, 17, maybe on this one around 20, pretty much all goes away. And yeah, definitely guys, probably one of my biggest tips, one of the best things I've learned is if you're having really bad chroma noise, like you don't mind the overall like grain aesthetic, definitely go into spatial threshold, unlink them, and just play around with the chroma slider. That's going to be an ultimate lifesaver. As someone who has worked a lot with especially helium 8K red footage, this is very on par in terms of dynamic range. I think the blacks are handled a lot better. I've shot low light with heliums, and I definitely had to use quite a bit more techniques to get the noise reduction, and to get the blacks truly black took a little bit more work. So from a footage standpoint, I think this is going to be an awesome, especially crash cam in Hollywood, because while it's an expensive camera for, you know, a one-off freelancer or anything, I mean, this is nothing for Hollywood. So they're definitely going to be throwing this in some pretty crazy scenarios for how small the package is. So I'm excited to see it fit into a bunch of people's workflows, and I really hope to get my hands on it one day. This footage definitely has me excited. It doesn't blow me away per se. I don't think it's drastically different than any other Red product. That's saying a lot right there, because I mean, obviously Red is really solid. So I'm going to stop this rambling. I'm impressed with the Komodo. I'm excited to see it go on actual production rather than just these weird kind of rollouts that they've been doing the past couple of months that have left a lot of people thirsty for more. Let me know down in the comments below if you're impressed. Are you going to pick up one of these cameras when you're able to? Do you have one already? If so, please let me be your friend and let's shoot something together. But other than that, hopefully you enjoyed my 2 cents and a couple tips and tricks for working with footage that is pretty noisy, and I'll see you guys in the next video.